This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
This episode is supported by FX's The Shards, a seductive drama from executive producer Ryan Murphy. Set in 1980s Los Angeles, the series follows a group of glamorous, deeply entangled high school seniors drawn into a life of wealth, beauty, parties, and excess. At its center is Brett, whose reality begins to unravel when the arrival of a new student coincides with a series of mysterious murders. FX's The Shards premieres August 5th on FX and Hulu.
Hello and welcome to The Best Worst, a celebration of the best and the worst of the television we love.
Hi, I'm Meg Bashwinner.
That's Meg Bashwinner. I'm Joseph Fink.
We created the show to explore what we all love about popular TV shows by watching both the IMDb viewer best rated and worst rated episodes of a quintessential series.
Because what better way to learn about TV than this arbitrary way we've decided to do it?
Than to just watch it and talk about it.
We watch shows with at least 100 episodes, unless they're under HBO rules, in which case it's 50, and we tend to exclude premieres or finales because those tend to have inflated ratings. Let's get to today's show.
Today's show is a special day because it's our first reality. And we've chosen to not go with reality. I mean, there's like a number of... Reality is such a broad genre. It includes things such as, Louis Theroux documentaries, as well as like Fuckboy Island. So it's a big ass genre. What we've chosen is one of my favorite types of reality shows to watch, which is anything made by Anthony Bourdain. So we have gone with No Reservations, which ran for 9 seasons from 2005 to 2012 with 144 episodes.
Well, I was going to say, what's your expectations with this show? But yeah, I would say most of the reason we chose this is because you're kind of an Anthony Bourdain super fan. You really loved this show.
I really loved this show. I never watched a Cook's Tour, I don't think.
No, he did, because he did a Cook's Tour, then he did No Reservations, then he did The Layover, and then he did Parts Unknown.
Yeah.
All of which were kind of the same show.
Parts Unknown and The Layover happened simultaneously.
Okay.
So how it all began was that Anthony Bourdain was a cook and a chef working in New York City, and he wrote an article, and then he wrote an article basically just about the behind the scenes of a working kitchen in New York City. And then he got a book deal from that. And then the book deal from that led to a second book deal. And the first book was very popular. It was an overnight success. Anthony Bourdain went from being a guy who was very much a working class chef living in New York City to almost like an instant beloved celebrity, which only became more so as the more content and shows that he ended up making. So when he first started, he was this book that was very buzzy. Everyone was reading it, and which led to a second book deal, which he wanted to do. His pitch for it was that he would travel around the world, finding more about people and how they ate. And at that time, a young producer, Lydia Tenalia, was working on a show called Trauma Life in the ER and was doing lots of like medical docuseries, and she wanted to get away from that because it was gory and because that wasn't something that she had a lot of passion for. And so she found out about the second book. She kind of cold called Tony at the restaurant, because he was still working at the restaurant at the time, and said, "Hey, I'm a TV producer. Would you be interested in trying to pitch the research you're doing for your next book as a TV show?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, fine." Because he was, I guess, getting a lot of phone calls at the time and just didn't really take it all that seriously. But Lydia and who would become her husband, Christopher Collins, went and met with him at Les Halles, and they shot just talking to him about what the what he was thinking a cook's tour would be like. And they took that, they pitched it to the Food Network, and the Food Network bought it. I mean, Bourdain talks about how he did not think that the Food Network would buy it. The Food Network at that point, the TV personalities were like very shiny and fresh-faced, and it was all the cooking shows were a lot of stand and stir and hands and pans, and very much like, I'm a pretty lady in my pretty kitchen, and this is what I'm making today.
And he had to kind of, I think, do some apologies later. He was, I think, in my opinion, a deeply insecure person. And he kind of lashed out about that by insulting people like Emeril
and Bobby
Flay, who were like the pretty, well, not pretty, but like the TV ready chefs. And he was very insulting about them, I think, because he felt very insecure about being on TV.
I also think at that time he might have had a bit of a chip on his shoulder about what type of cook he was. Very much a gritty line cook, in the shit, in the deep fryer, cigarettes, snorting coke through penne, doing heroin, like very much this world of the underbelly of kitchens. And then you see someone on TV like Sandra Lee, who was doing, semi-homemade meals where she's taking food out of a package and putting it on a tray. I think that Tony found that sort of stuff abhorrent to food and to culture. So he pitches it to the TV. He didn't take it seriously. He was like, they're not going to hire me. I'm like a scruffy restaurant dude, and we want to like go shoot in Vietnam. No one's going to want to buy that. He's like, I don't think I even brushed my hair or brush my teeth to go to this interview, and they bought it. And so they found themselves their first shot. The first show that they were going to shoot was in Tokyo, and Lydia and Chris had never made a show on their own before, and they had actually just gotten married. They sort of fell in love in the process in the time between pitching the show and starting to shoot it. And so they were sort of on their honeymoon, and it was just the three of them. It was Anthony and Lydia and Christopher, and they started shooting it, and they, I guess, never really talked about what it would be, because they would point the camera at Tony and be like, okay, where are we and what are we doing? He's like, wait, you mean I have to talk? Like, I thought you were just going to have the camera over my shoulder while I was like walking through markets and stuff. So, and then like Lydia and Chris would come back to the hotel at night and be like, this is awful. This is not going well. And then they moved on locations. They moved to Vietnam. And then in Vietnam, things started to click. Anthony was obsessed with Vietnam and knew so much about it. And it's just the Japanese culture is very formal. So being a tourist being guided through Japan, it's a very formal experience. There's a lot which didn't necessarily jive with Tony's tone at the time, or also even just with being young filmmakers. It didn't really jive with it. But in Vietnam, it was a much more relaxed culture, a much more what felt like physically welcoming culture, and things started to click there. And they also, at that point, Anthony Bourdain did not really think that TV could be anything special, but was a huge fan of film and books. And as were Lydia and Chris, they had a lot of shared interests there. And so they realized when they were in Vietnam, they could make references to films and books and make something new and interesting from that. So they started thinking about Apocalypse Now, and they were in Vietnam, and they started to have fun with it. And then they built a whole new thing that didn't exist before, which is a show like this.
Yeah, and we've talked about there's been a lot of work to try to kind of recreate it to some commercial success, but I think less artistic success. You have, Somebody Feed Phil. You have the Stanley Tucci going around Italy. You have Padma's one season show where he went around America. This like
David Chang's.
And some of them, I think Somebody Feed Phil does great.
I mean, it's also made by the Lydia and Chris, their production company 0.0. So,
right, but I just don't think that any of them have quite captured what made Anthony Bourdain shows interesting.
I think there's a number of reasons for that. Anthony Bourdain is a unique talent. He's a unique voice. And this was also at a time when people watched television and before everyone was a roaming photojournalist with an iPhone. So like you go on TikTok now, and a lot of it is people being like, I'm at this restaurant, I'm trying this food. And that wasn't a thing that you could have access to before. So it's a very much an oversaturated market as far as travel shows go. And then we also don't have a centralized location to watch it. So back in the when a cook's tour was happening, it was the early 2000s. Food Network was like one of the places where you watched television. So they did 2 seasons of a cook's tour. The impulse from the network at that time was for it to be sort of not like a gross out show, but look what weird thing he's going to eat. And like every episode had to have something to do. Like every scene was about a restaurant, and that was his way in. The Travel Channel, they approached the Travel Channel because they wanted to do something a little different from that. They wanted to not have every segment, be reliant on food. Food has always been their touchstone, but they wanted to try to do other stuff and to not have it be like a look at this other culture, how weird and gross, which is where the pressure they were sort of getting from the Food Network. So they moved to the Travel Channel and they made No Reservations there. There was a executive who they really liked who seemed to understand them. And so they did a bunch of seasons of No Reservations there. And then eventually that executive left and they sort of ran out again on their creative limitations with what the network wanted to do. And then they moved to CNN. CNN approached them for Parts Unknown. So CNN was starting to do documentary TV at the time. And so it's basically all these shows are the same show.
Yeah, they get a little less food focused each time. Like I think each iteration is slightly less food focused than the one before.
Yeah.
But they are kind of all the same show.
And then the layover is more of it's like you have 3 days in the city. What are you eating? What are you doing?
Yeah, but that's not super different
and they're in
than
hubs.
The other ones.
I really liked the layover. So, yeah, so that is...
To go back to, because we started this with our expectations. You're a Bourdain super fan. To get to my expectations, I would say I'm significantly less of a Bourdain fan. Like I don't have anything against him. To me, this is very like if I'm in a hotel and it's on TV. Like I would be very happy to watch this on a hotel TV. It's not TV I ever sought out. It was just kind of a thing I saw when it happened to be on in places.
I see it as it's a great way to learn about places that you might never get to go.
Yeah.
And to learn about things that you might not ever really learn about. This ran for 9 seasons from 2005 to 2012, 144 episodes. The worst episode is season 3, episode 4, Namibia.
This is also one of those ones, I think we got this with the Cosby Show too, where HBO gave it said it was in season 2. I think shows like this were a little looser with what episode number it was than like some of the more modern serialized shows. I think there's a little more of like wherever the network happened to put it. So HBO Max thinks this is a season 2 episode. IMDb thinks it's a season 3 episode. Who knows?
So he goes to Namibia, which is a country in southern Africa on the Atlantic Ocean. And it's a very particularly dry climate. So I think it's the driest country in Africa.
Did you know anything about Namibia going in?
Not too much, no, other than what he mentions that Brad and Angelina Jolie adopted a child or children from there.
I knew about Namibia because there is a place there that is one of the more kind of haunting and interesting places in the world. He didn't cover it at all because I don't think anyone lives anywhere near it. Have you ever heard of the Skeleton Coast?
No.
Okay, so the coastline of Namibia...
Is that where the surfers go?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
It is a very good surf spot, but it's also a very haunting spot because it is a desert that goes along the entire coastline. It gets basically no rainfall. It is entirely barren. However, it gets incredibly dense offshore fog. It is this thing where there's like fog offshore, but it never goes onshore. And then there's also very heavy surf coming in, which means that it is very possible to land a boat there, but basically impossible before engines to launch a boat from there. So as a result, just hundreds and hundreds of shipwrecks happened along this coast. And then if you shipwrecked there, you were stranded in the middle of a desert where no one lived. And so it's this just barren, very striking coast covered in the rusted hulls of ships. It's a very haunting place. So I knew about the Skeleton Coast coming in. That's
we
kind
also
of what
have
I knew about this country.
A brown fur seal colony. Anyway, so in this episode, he does not go to the Skeleton Coast, but would be cool. Would be pretty cool. He eats some of the local specialties. He surfs some dunes. He most notably eats a warthog rectum that was killed by local and prepared by local bushmen. I think that is why people think this is the worst episode, because he describes it as some of the worst food that he's ever eaten, and he got very sick from it.
Yeah, I mean, calling it food is really overstating it. This is warthog anus that is unwashed, like they pull a piece of poop out of it and then throw it in fire, and then it is cooked for like 30 seconds in fire and handed to him.
Yeah.
Barely singed, straight out of the warthog anus.
And while he does eat stuff in the show that we would consider gross based on our culinary backgrounds, how we have experienced food in our lifetime. That's not really the show that he wanted to make, and I don't think that's really the show that ultimately it became. However, he said he had this thing called the grandma rule, which was like, pretend that you're at your grandma's house. You're going to eat what she serves you, and if she says crazy shit to you, you're going to say, "That's okay, grandma. Thanks for having me over." Like, it is. He understood that he was a guest in these places, and it was never to be a guest to say, "Ooh, look how gross this is." It was like, "Oh, this is different from me because these people come from a different place than me. These people have a different history than me." And then, I mean, a lot in this episode, it's these people have so much less than we have as Americans. So this is what they are making do with. Like, there's the one point where he goes to the Topnar community, and these people are living off of a single plant because the climate is so harsh. There's this one plant that thrives there. It's this single resource for everything. It's their staple food. They show him all the different ways they make it. They make it into a porridge. They eat the seeds. They roast them. They boil them. They're doing like so many different things with just one plant because that is all that grows there.
Yeah, the issue this episode has that makes it the worst, I think, is this is still a food show at this time, very much. Like, it's early No Reservations. It's still very focused on food. And he's going to a country where there is clearly a pretty severe lack of food in a lot of the places he's visiting. There's these people, the bush people he visits. Part of the reason they're eating like this is that's not where they're from. Kind of the region that their entire culture was built around, they were driven out of, and they were driven into a desert area that gets almost no rain. And so it's sort of a like needs must, they're eating whatever the fuck is there. And so it just doesn't work great with for a show that is still a food show to visit a place where people are starving is a hard sell. It's a hard thing to pull off.
And then he does go to this market in, I think it's pronounced Windhoek, where there's like lots of meats being grilled, and it's like the hub of shopping activity. There's lots of basically it's a lot of grilled meat and with salt and pepper. And his guide is telling him like, this is a really big deal. A place where people like can come out and like go buy food is a huge deal around here. And the food doesn't really look appetizing. I bet it smells good. I bet the smell of all that meat cooking over charcoal smells great. But as far as like visually appealing to me, it does not look like something that I want to eat. But what is conveyed to me in that scene is the importance of like a marketplace, the importance of people to come together to buy food, to eat food, to like sit out and be together. And that's, I think, that's a lot of what Bourdain was about, was like, where there's food, there's people. And from that, we can learn about basically everything you need to know.
One thing, and I think we can get into this more with the best, because that one illustrated it even more. But when thinking about a question we kind of have not addressed in a while, which is, can we see what made the show so loved, even in its worst episode? I do think we're seeing some of what made Bourdain interesting here, which is food shows and even travel food shows like formula. You know, if you watch a Tucci, if you watch Somebody Feeds Phil, there is a formula to it. It's very gentle. You know what to expect. He's going to go visit a restaurant. He's going to talk. He's going to shake hands with the chef. The chef's going to show him something. He's going to eat it. And Bourdain did the kind of travel that resists formula. It's hard. You can't do the formula when you're traveling in a place like this, because there's not necessarily a restaurant where you can go shake the chef's hand.
And what if they don't catch the warthog? What if they don't find the ostrich eggs?
Yeah, like they're not going to be able to cook you their famous pulled pork slider, and then you're going to be able to eat it. Like, there's this sense of things can go a little off the rails, and they do. And that's, I think, that was part of the magic ingredient of Bourdain that some of these other shows don't have, is his show didn't follow a formula as much because it couldn't, because the kind of travel he was doing is the kind of travel that could and did went off the rails occasionally. In this case, it went off the rails by essentially by bad planning, I think, on the producer's part, in terms of like trying to do a food show with populations that are experiencing severe food shortages. And so I don't know if they were prepared to do the kind of show yet. I think later Bourdain could have done better, but I think they were just not yet prepared to do the kind of show that you would need to do with populations that were experiencing food scarcity.
That's also one of the things that sort of rubbed me the wrong way with this episode is, and maybe that was the only way how, but every person he talks to, for the most part, there's two people that are not that, but they're like white men who are like who live in the culture, but like his access in is through a white man. Like it's the with the Bushmen, it's like a guy who's married to a bushwoman. Are they called bushwomen?
I don't know.
Anyway, someone who's part of that community. There's an oyster farmer.
He's Spanish.
There's a German, he's like third generation South African.
Third generation German colonizer. Because I believe, and I apologize if I'm wrong, is Namibia used to be part of South Africa and then got independence.
Yes.
And that's, or at least parts of it. And so that's part of what's happening there, is you have some of the same culture as South Africa happening there. My only note that I have is we have like a brief, I think he's like comparing where he's from to this place. And so you see him in New York City, and how they illustrate him in New York City is him smoking and reading the New York Post, which is just like such a, for those of you who don't know, the New York Post is an absolute right-wing rag, just like some of the worst right-wing propaganda.
And Tony Bourdain, lifelong left-wing, like...
Yeah, confused. I don't know. Maybe he did read the New York Post. Who knows?
I think a lot of people read the New York Post for entertainment, and it felt, or at least did, before things became so completely toxic. There is a little bit tongue in cheek to read a tabloid, because it's essentially a tabloid. So
yeah, it's just an extremely right wing tabloid. I want to say it's part of News Corp. I might be wrong about that.
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all? I mean, it's true. Every single book I've ever published was published by a subsidiary of News Corp. So what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
Live ethically. That sounds hard.
Not under what system? Anyway. So yeah, so that's Namibia. This episode did not stick out as bad to me, other than like the discourse around it is like, he ate the grossest thing he ever ate. He ate a warthog asshole that was undercooked. I mean, the whole warthog stuff is pretty tough. They also eats an ostrich egg that's cooked in dirt.
Yeah, they just drop it in hot sand, and so it still has both ash and like clumps of dirt in the egg.
Yeah,
it's rough. I mean, these are people experiencing food scarcity and eating whatever they can get.
Also, just like that's how they cook food. They don't have, $500 carbon steel pans.
We did have the question with ostrich egg. Why not just cook it in the egg?
Cook it in the shell.
Could she not just put the shell on the fire?
Yeah. And then with the warthog, why not just not eat the asshole? But I mean, or at least clean it. But they don't have water, so they can't they can't really rinse things.
And again, this is not where their entire culture was built for a different area. They have been driven out of where they live and know how to survive well to a place that has almost no water and that they are strangers to. And so they're making do with what they have.
He had such a deep respect for people and for their food that he would never, there's stuff in the voiceover about how this is difficult for him to eat, but he understands that it's difficult for him to eat because this is not food that he has. This is not how his brain was taught to think about food. So he understands that is the issue. Not that these people are gross, not that these people are less than, but that these people are just simply different. And there's things that I see in their culture that I think are really beautiful. They're they have a family culture. So they're in groups of their families, which I think is really lovely to be in a tribal situation that is but with your family, you're spending all day, every day with your aunts and uncles and kids. And that seems really cool. As someone who lives really far from most of their family, it would be cool if we all just ate warthog asshole together, right? If that was our everyday.
Yeah. To me, I think this was also the worst one because I haven't seen Points Unknown. Parts Unknown. I suspect that he got more able to handle situations like this. But I think at this point in both him and the people behind the camera, I just don't think they were equipped. I think they, to forgive the metaphor, bit off more than they could chew. I don't think they were equipped to talk about people dealing with this kind of starvation on a food show. I just don't quite think they knew what to do with that.
I wouldn't say that all the people on the show were starving, though, in this episode.
Okay, maybe starving is a strong word. Most of them were experiencing pretty severe food scarcity, and they talked about that. The Bushmen were not eating warthog asshole for fun. They were really, really food deprived, as were the people who were eating entirely based on a single vegetable that they could grow there. These were populations that were not doing well. And I just don't know if they were equipped at this time to cover that well.
I think they did for the time. And I think that they're not journalists. They never purport themselves to be journalists.
But that's the issue, is I think later he did become more of a journalist.
He
and he might have
would
been able,
never, ever identify as journalist, nor would he say what he is doing is journalism.
except for that's sort of what the whole point of moving to CNN was, is he didn't want to have to cover food anymore. He just wanted to get to...
It wasn't that he didn't want to have to cover food anymore. It's that he...
Per the documentary about him we watched last night, part of it is they just didn't want to have to be a food show anymore. They wanted to be able to just make a thing about a place.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is food-based because that's one of his interests. It's also one of the interests of the producers. Lydia Tenalia, who was the sort of driving force behind all of the initial success of this. This was her idea. This was her thing. We think about Bourdain a lot as this solo traveler, but the crew that he had that was built by Lydia and Chris was a lot of the reason that his work was good. It's a lot of the reason that his work was, watchable was because of the crew that they put together. At first, it was just the three of them out there doing it. But eventually, Lydia and Chris, she starts her own business, starts her own production company, which was one of her lifelong dreams, was to have a production company where she made films and documentaries and TV that mattered, that had a purpose of serving a population, connecting humanity. This was like a lot of the dreams that we associate with Bourdain. I think it was a shared dream with Lydia and Chris and their production company, 0.0, which has gone on to, they made Anthony Bourdain stuff, but they continue to make documentaries both about food and not about food. They are still making a lot of TV. They make Somebody Feed Phil, which is like a little bit more lighthearted, but they also have made films about food waste. They've made there's this like hunter that they follow they've made a lot of shows about him. So they are making shows exploring space programs. So yeah.
I mean, we're in the worst, so let's get to a controversy, which is just going to be controversial statement. Based on, we watched Roadrunner, the documentary about him, and one thing that came through is, I don't know that Lydia, the producer, I think she maybe loved Anthony Bourdain like family. I don't think she liked him at all.
I think that they had I think that people describe Anthony Bourdain as the most likable asshole you're ever gonna meet. I think he's grumpy. I think he's moody. I think he is tough on people. They describe him as particularly tough on people that he works with.
Well, I think they were being nice about it. Based on what we saw, I think he was intolerably mean to everyone he worked. This gets to my statement, which is,
I that he's intolerably mean to everyone he works with.
They read a really insulting email that he sent to a producer, and he was like, "This is how he talked to people that he liked." There was a number of people who worked with him who talked about the way that he treated them. That you had to, like, if you wanted him to work with you, you had to literally stand in his way and he'd run you over. That he, in my opinion, he was at minimum not a very nice person to kind of anyone. Also, his close friends in the documentary talked about some really horrible things he said to them. And I think just overall, in my opinion, I don't know if he was a very good person. He abandoned his family, essentially. He had this family, he had his wife, they had a kid. He was very excited about that. But then and this is very much a choice. Like, you didn't have to be working this much. He was away from them for 250 days out of the year, which is just not how you can raise a child. That's not a way to be a parent. And then eventually abandoned them for a movie star that he had a crush on. I don't know. I think he was an interesting guy. I think he had some really good things. I just overall find him to maybe be not a great person.
I think he is a person who has been troubled since the beginning of his life. He always described himself as like an angry kid. He is not sure what he was angry about. He grew up in relative comfort in just outside of New York City and New Jersey. And he then, ultimately became a drug addict and was a person who wasn't necessarily a drug addict, but just an addict of things, an obsessive, a manic obsessive person. He went from being, addicted to drugs to being addicted to work, to being addicted to having this family life, to being addicted back to work again, being addicted to, and then being addicted ultimately to his last girlfriend, which did not go well for him. So I think that he was a troubled person. I don't think that he's like, I don't necessarily believe in like good or bad people. I think we're all a bunch of different things. I think that he was a troubled person who at times was doing his best, and then at times he was choosing to not do his best. I wouldn't say that he abandoned his family. I think that he had the idea of this family life and he lived it and was obsessed with it, and then it fell apart.
But
and
even when he was obsessed with it, he was away all but 100 days a year. Like, how can you be part of a family when you're...
Well, I think you have the thing in you that is the workaholism, that is also the point of like, the issue with fame is like, he did not become famous until he was 43, 44. Lived in like, was like barely making rent, a lot of times not making rent, just at like not having this big, and then overnight he became a successful author. And then what is the saying is the top of one mountain is just the bottom of the next. I think that is really, in fame and in entertainment, that is a huge driving factor. You're like, I'm this great book. Okay. And then now I'm going to build into be this TV star. Okay. Now I have this speaking tours. Now I have a production company. And it is just like the bottom of one, the top of one mountain is just the bottom of the next. And so I think he had the drive to be pushing in his career and doing more. He also, at that point, he was supporting the family, and he was the guy who they pointed the camera at where all of these people had jobs. So like, there's that pressure there that he is trying to rise to. So yes, he's gone 250 days a year. Maybe that's a choice that he feels like he is not having a choice in making. Maybe he's feeling like the responsibility of providing for that family and providing for all of the families that are pointing the camera at him.
Yeah, I just, I don't know. We have a daughter. I could not imagine being away from her for 250 days a year. That
yeah,
would
but
feel
we like
bad.
we had always thought that we would have it like a kid. We would always had thought that we would settle down and have this family life. He did that in his early 50s. He was not something that he expected to have in his life. And then when he found it, it did become part of his obsession. But like with all of his obsessions and addiction, they cycle out. And it's so awful and tragic that one of those is his family. But he was a person who was, when he was in it, he was in it. And then when he was out of it, he was on to the next thing. So, I mean, yeah. We're talking about Bourdain a lot, which is like not something that like I really like him as a person. I'm more into the work that he made. I find his shows really interesting and really evocative. I like his writing. I like his worldview. I like the way that people look at the world after seeing something that he has made. There is a lot of like, oh, Bourdain would have loved this. Bourdain would have hated this. I don't give a shit whether he would have hated it or loved it or whatever it is. Like, it's what we have is what he has left. Like, we can't go forward and be like, this is what Anthony would think. Like, he silenced that conversation, so we need to stop having it.
Yeah. As I said, I think he's very talented. I had said I think his shows captured something that every show since has been trying to and failed to quite capture, which is this sort of authenticity of self and authenticity of connection that defies formula. I just think that I find him as a person rough to deal with. I find a lot of who he was as a person not great. And so that's my controversy.
That's your controversy.
Is my feeling about him.
A lot of the controversy around Anthony Bourdain really is kind of circling around the last few years of his life.
Yeah, so he, and we'll talk about it in the middle, how far back this went, but he ended up with Asia Argento, the Italian film star and filmmaker, daughter of Dario Argento. And she became a big face of the Me Too movement, doing a big speech on stage at Cannes. He went all in, again, with his like manic obsessive stuff. He like went very much all in on supporting her with Me Too. They didn't, interestingly, I found it very interesting that in the documentary about him, they fully left this part out. But later, Asia Argento was herself accused of sexual assault by a child who she was a co-star with in a movie. And Anthony Bourdain personally paid the guy off like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they're, I don't know. The vibe I get is Asia Argento also not great, not a great person, and not good for him.
I think, yeah, there was a transition period where he went from being a family man to no longer being a family man to this sort of next chapter of his life is the last chapter of his life. And it wasn't good for him. It was like he was sort of floundering, experiencing lots of depression, experiencing manic behavior. And and then he was in this relationship. I also think I saw this somewhere. I don't remember where, so I don't know if it's verified. He started taking a lot of like human growth hormone and testosterone to, and like Viagra to like be able to keep up with Aja and like feel young and be like.
Yeah, she was significantly younger than him, right?
I think she's about 20 years younger than him.
Yeah,
18 years younger than him.
She certainly looked.
Yeah, so I think that he was trying to, and he was like full on obsessed with her. Like it was, so like I think that contributed those like hormones and drugs that he was taking to try to stay young and youthful probably fucked up his brain chemistry quite a bit, in addition to the loneliness, in addition to excessive drinking, smoking again.
Lydia and Chris tell this pretty tragic story in the documentary about he came to them and was like, I can't do this show anymore. It's killing me. I just want to be with my girlfriend and kind of live a quiet life. And they were like, great, go for it. And he couldn't do it. Like he didn't know what to do when they said yes, when they didn't argue with him, and he kind of froze. And then he just kept doing the show because it turns out he thought he was trapped in that show, but in point of fact, he couldn't bring himself to leave it.
Yeah, and as a result, one of the directors of the episode had to have his gallbladder removed, so he wasn't able to direct the episode. So Anthony was like, let's bring in Aja to direct it. Aja's the director. And so they brought in Aja.
Whose name is variously pronounced in that documentary as Aja, and then what I thought it was, which is Azia. I'm not clear, actually, whether it's Aja or Azia.
Anyway, so they brought her in to direct the episode, and that was like, and they also brought in a different cinematographer, and that was like really tough on the production crew. Like the producers of that episode, of the Hong Kong episode, were like, this is on Parts Unknown. They were like, this is one of them, she says in the documentary, if I die before I'm 40, that shoot will be because of it. But it was tough. And Anthony was like so happy that she was there and so happy that they were doing it this way. And like, but everyone else was kind of like, this is not fucking working.
They fired, did you just say this? They fired his like 15-year-long cinematographer.
Got into a disagreement with Aja about how to shoot it, and Anthony just fired him on the spot. And
then brought in like this kind of another guy that Anthony Bourdain was super into. And so Anthony Bourdain was like having the time of his life because his girlfriend, his movie star girlfriend that he's obsessed with, is directing it. There's this like legendary cinematographer filming it. But the issue is that neither of these people have any idea how to make a show like
how to make this show.
Yeah. They just don't know how to do it. And so they're
like interrupting people, like when there's this dinner scene where Anthony's talking to these refugees, and this guy's talking about hope and like a really like in very much an emotional place, and like Aja calls cut and has to move the table, whereas like that is something that would like never have happened. They would just be like, so the shot looks a little messy, like it doesn't matter, we're trying to get this, at least even just get the audio of it and we can cut away. But anyway, so
there's this funny moment in the documentary where you get the like guest cinematographer being like, this is the most beautiful shot. This is an incredible shot. And then they show the shot and it looks like shit. It's just like Anthony Bourdain in a boat. It's not a good shot.
But yeah, that's the worst. There's also, that's the controversy Bourdain, which I think we talked about, is that he was a difficult person.
We also didn't get it. I think most people know this, but very briefly, what happened is he was doing a shoot in France with his best friend, Eric Ripert, a highly acclaimed French chef.
Who's been on the show a whole bunch, been on Parts Unknown and No Reservations.
Just like one of his best friends in the world. And Anthony Bourdain hung himself overnight in the hotel room. Eric Ripert found him in the morning. And that is how everything ended for Anthony.
Yeah. It really, like, if from the way that the people in the documentary talk about it and from just the reporting I've seen on it, it really feels like he made a permanent decision with some temporary emotions, and that it wasn't something that was like...
Aja broke up with him that night, I think, was a kind of knee-jerk reaction to that, coming off of years of untreated manic depression.
Yeah. And he left a lot behind.
His daughter is now 19.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he had a lot of very dear friends. Also, the people who made his show. And 0.0 has continued on and has been diversifying since the beginning. Lydia Tenaglia is a brilliant businesswoman in addition to being a brilliant documentarian and producer. And so she, they're still out there making and doing without him.
I mean, it is notable that despite how horribly he seemed to sometimes treat his friends, there was, like the artist David Cho talked about he had not cut his hair in the 2 years since Bourdain died. Josh Hum, the guy from Queens of the Stone Age who was very good friends with him, just stopped working. He's like, I haven't toured in 2 years. I just can't bring myself to do it. So, these people were deeply affected by him. Here's some ads and then come back with our intermission, which is How Is That theme song.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel, maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
And we're back to do How Is That theme song?
No Reservations.
It's fine. It's less than fine.
The other ones get better. I feel like the Parts Unknown theme song is better.
So it's by the band The John Spencer Blues Explosion, a band I've heard of, although I don't know anything about. They're a blues rock band from New York City. This seems pretty in line with their work. Like, I listened to a couple of their other big songs, and it's all kind of just blues chords with a guy going, yeah, what's that? Into the mic. They broke up in 2018. One of their members got too sick to tour, and so they just stopped being a band. I deeply dislike blues rock. I think blues, great. I think blues rock to me is a very white manifestation of blues that turns it into something really uninteresting. Just kind of the same chord pattern played in the same way by the same crunchy guitar while a white guy kind of sings the same thing into a melody. I really do not like blues rock. It's probably my least favorite genre of rock. So I would give this theme song a 2. I fucking hate music like this. How about you?
It's fine. It's fine. I feel great about it.
Great. What number?
I'd give it a 6.
Cool. All right, let's get to the best, which is, it's season 2, episode 14, Beirut. However, it is kind of branded by the Travel Channel as this special Anthony Bourdain in Beirut because of the events in the episode. Do you want to? Yeah,
they didn't think that they were going to be able to make an episode out of this, and they didn't really want to make an episode out of this.
Bourdain absolutely did not want to.
The network prevailed on this. So
they had so much good footage.
They had so much good
footage. They're not going
to
be not allowed to use that.
Ultimately, what they made was incredible. And
got them nominated for an Emmy.
Yeah, and sort of put them on the map, and then also sort of, let's get into it. So this episode, Beirut, they go to Beirut in Lebanon, and they're having a really good time. They get a couple
to
scenes
do their food
in.
Stuff.
They're having a really great time. Lebanon is a great country for food. Beirut is a great country for food.
Lebanese food, one of the great foods of the world.
Beirut's a great city for food. They love their food. They love their culture. It's very anglicized, and the people are young and rich, and they drink and go to clubs on rooftops.
It has very Miami vibes.
Yeah, and like the food is good, and people are so passionate about their culture and about their food, and they're like getting good shit. They get 2 days in, or two scenes in, and like there is sort of they do talk about the Beiruti devil may care attitude of like, so they're dropping bombs, so what? We're still going to go to the club. Like so what if we live? We have to live. So what if we die? We have to live. And then they're at a restaurant, and Hezbollah has. I think it was kidnapped Iraqi soldiers and
Israeli soldiers. They ambushed an Israeli patrol, killed most of them, and kidnapped 2 of them, which they find out because there's like automatic gunfire happening, and it turns out it's like a celebration parade of people shooting guns in the air.
And they see people driving through the streets. See Hezbollah driving through the streets, celebrating, and the guy that Tony's with at that point is just like crestfallen. He's like, "Fuck, this isn't going to be good." Like, it's like really the balloon of joy that is this episode is just like instantly deflated in that moment. And then it becomes a dangerous situation because Israel is like shelling the shit out of southern Beirut, and the production company is not in a secure place, in a secure hotel. So they call a fixer gets called in that he calls Mr. Wolf from Pulp Fiction. And Mr. Wolf sort of loads the crew into cars and drives them like through the abandoned streets of Beirut to a hotel that's a more secure location because it's near the U.S. Embassy. And then they stay there at the hotel by the embassy for 10 days, I think, with this fixer coming in and making sure that like they're moving rooms, they're moving things together, they're like planning evacuation plans, they're like telling them to switch up their routine so they don't get kidnapped. They have like they're at this hotel with a bunch of other displaced people who are displaced because their homes have been bombed, but also people who are displaced because they were just visiting Beirut, like Americans just visiting Beirut.
Yeah, this is a fancy hotel. So like the people that are there too are other. They're like the one appears to be like an American woman who's married to a Lebanese man. It's like a little bit like more of the like wealthy expat refugees happening
and
there.
which at that time in 2006 a lot of people had moved back to or like bought second home. Rich Americans bought second homes in Beirut. Like they had nice condos there and like they were like, oh yeah, I'll buy so they're at this hotel and they're still shooting because they're documentary filmmakers, so they're still shooting.
And there's this weird thing where the hotel's on a hill overlooking the whole city, and specifically the swimming pool kind of overlooks, and so they just spend all day at the swimming pool watching Israel bomb the city because it's like they have this whole view of the city. They're just watching this bombing happen from their hotel.
Yeah, and then they also are like other people are getting out. And so like they see helicopters coming to pull people out. Eventually, the U.S. Embassy is like, okay, the Marines are going to come and evacuate them. So Mr. Wolf gets them, like it's go time. He gets them in the cars and he gets them to the beach where the boat is going to come for them, and it's like absolute fucking chaos. He's like, there is nothing organized at all. Anthony Bourdain's like, any concert promoter in the world could do a better job than the embassy is doing right now.
Any busy restaurateur could do a better job too, which is very funny because that is, I think, basically the entire premise of the kitchen.
World Centric Kitchen, yeah.
The whole premise of World Centric Kitchen is any competent chef can organize this.
Yeah,
and that's what they did.
So, but there's just total disorganization there. So they again rely on Mr. Wolf, who like is going under trucks and like pulling them through, eventually gets them on the boat. And then they say that like the instant they get on the boat and they go from being in the hands of the embassy to being in the hands of the Marines, it is a complete like night and day thing. And that the Marines take such incredible care of everyone who's on that boat, like all the different types of people that are on that boat, because there's Americans who are being taken out of there. There's also other people who hold dual passports. There's people who've lost their homes and are leaving.
There's a lot of kids. There's a lot of kids.
There's people who are, I mean, if you have a dual passport at that point, you're living in Lebanon and you have young children, you're getting the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
And if you have that American passport, you're going with the Marines and you're leaving.
One of the Marines helped carry these two kids onto the boat, and there's this incredible shot of him like running with these two crying children in his hands, and they're all like kind of razzing him that he's going to be on the cover of Time magazine with the shot of him saving the children.
But yeah, Bourdain talks about like at length how he had just taken care of, they all were on the boat by the Marines, and like he's like, you don't really think of Marines as like welcoming, hospitable, deeply caring people, but like they very much were in that situation.
I mean, the thing about Marines that you see in this episode is they're all fucking 20.
Yeah.
Like it's a bunch of 20-year-olds who probably have never met a Lebanese person having to like console traumatized people. Like it's just so completely outside of their experience and their training.
And they're doing it and like, yeah. And then they also there's a little bit about food in this episode that's not, there's a scene where they're in the safe house hotel where they go to the hotel kitchen and Anthony Bourdain cooks dinner for everyone. He also apparently saved a plate for Mr. Wolf and had him come eat it. Mr. Wolf did an interview about his experience, the anonymous interview, because he is an anonymous fixer. After Bourdain died, he talked to the press about that time.
What an absolutely interesting job to be like just like the global security fixer for media teams that need like extraction from dangerous situations.
Yeah.
I don't even know how, I mean, presumably you're like a Black Ops person that retired or something.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And then they also eat on the boat to Cyprus, and they have tuna noodle casserole, and Bourdain just waxes poetic about how like tuna noodle casserole is like a punchline. It's a joke, but like in this situation, it is the most comforting thing. Like this is defining comfort food, is being fed on this boat.
At the end of the episode, he gives this very pessimistic speech about the world, which is like very characteristically depressed Bourdain.
I have a different take on it,
but it also puts into words some of what I was thinking watching both of these episodes that I talked about before. Of what made Bourdain shows interesting is that they resisted the kind of formula that a food show, even a travel food show, is supposed to have. You know, things go wrong, things happen, and people continue to exist. They're not props for your show. And so he gives this speech at the end about...
I have it if you'd like me to read it.
Sure, hon.
So he says, I wasn't in Haifa. I wasn't in the north of Israel. I don't know what that was like. I was in Beirut. In the few years since I started to travel this world, I'd found myself changing. The cramped, cynical worldview of a man who'd only seen life through the narrow prism of the restaurant kitchen had altered. I'd been so many places. I'd met so many people from wildly divergent backgrounds, countries, and cultures. Everywhere I'd been, as in Beirut, treated so well. I'd been the recipient of random acts of kindness from strangers, and I had begun to think that no matter where I'd been or who I'd sat down with, that food and a few drinks seemed to always bring people together, that this planet was filled with basically good and decent people doing the best they could, if frequently under difficult circumstances, that the human animal was perhaps a better and nicer species than I'd once thought. I'd begun to believe that the dinner table was the great leveler, where people from opposite sides of the world could always sit down and talk and eat and drink, and if not solve the world's problems, at least for a time, common ground. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe the world's not like that at all. Maybe in the real world, the one without cameras and happy food and travel shows, everybody, the good and the bad, together are all crushed under the same terrible wheel. I really hope I'm wrong about that.
Yeah. Which, I think it's about a lot of things, but one of the things it made me think about is this idea that food travel shows are about turning the world into entertainment. But his point is that no matter how hard you do that, the world also exists outside of the frame of your camera, that you don't have control over what is happening, that no matter how much you dress it up, the world is the world, and it defies your wanting to turn it into entertainment. And I think that is part of what made his shows interesting, is he kind of leaned into that. He leaned into the way that the world can't be turned into a prop, that it will kind of resist your urge to put it into a box.
And that travel is political.
Yeah.
Food is political. You can't escape it.
Yeah.
And now here we are in yet another situation where Israel is bombing the shit out of Lebanon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Slightly less provoked this time, but this one just seemed to be a fuck it, we're bombing everyone.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so, yeah, I mean, what do you like? I also want to believe that, like, as humans, we're all the same, and that we have things that we all share, and that is what connects us. That is what connects humanity. But then also, yeah, there is the other. Is it all just the same wheel that's going to crush all of us? I think it's both, unfortunately.
Yeah. A thing I think about is, like, there's so much cruelty among people, and that's really awful, and it can kind of give you a dark view of humanity. But also that cruelty is bad because it's being done against humans, and I really cherish and value humans. We're both sides of the coin here. We're going to solve this on The Best Worst, which is about the best and worst impulses of the human spirit. By watching the IMDb worst rated and best rated impulses of the human spirit to get a sense of where we're at. Notes. By the way, I'm not doing, they have no credited directors. Everyone was just credited as producer. So it's kind of hard to tell specific roles on any given episode. So that's why I'm not doing like director bios. There's a point in this one where Anthony Bourdain and Meg's dad are kind of similar ages and from similar areas, and they make the exact same gestures when they talk. Just watching, like Jack Bashmaner just does the exact same things with his hands while he talks. It was very striking. There's like really, really specific gestures that Anthony Bourdain does that I'm like, that I have seen Jack Bashmaner do that many times.
The Beirut episode was nominated for an Emmy Award for Outstanding in Informational Programming in 2007. In 2009 and 2011, the series won the Emmy for Outstanding Cinematography for Nonfiction Programming.
Having seen it, yeah, I mean, I think I'm at the same place with it, where I think it's good and interesting work. I don't think it's the type of show I seek out. I'm not particularly interested in binging the rest of his work for me. But I mean, I really respect what he's doing, even though I'm not sure I 100% respect him. How about you?
After watching it again, it made me want to watch more of it. Like I'm a fan of people. I think he is also a fan of people, and you talked about it earlier. I love people. I find everyone's story so inherently fascinating. Everyone's story. So getting to just see so many different ones in one episode of television, I find that incredible. I've always loved documentary. I've always loved personal storytelling. I've always loved that. So I will continue to love that. I would like to go back and watch some stuff again. This definitely sparked my appetite to go back and look at stuff. I love all this stuff. I think the unpopular opinion, I really like The Layover. And I think that was because of at the time I was traveling a lot in a way where I wasn't vacationing, but getting to sort of have a layover experience with cities where being like, okay, I have 2 hours to get lunch. Where can I go? And I would watch a show, like I could watch a show that was doing basically the life that I was living.
Yeah, it's it's a very different type of travel, but one of the reasons he was really good friends with the Queens of the Stone Age guy is that they could really relate. Anthony Bourdain's travel for the show and the Queens of the Stone Age touring with music is very similar in the sense of like compulsive travel that is not a vacation where you don't get to choose where you're going, where you're kind of having to do a certain thing in a certain amount of time in a place. They, I think, really related to around that. Especially how they used to shoot No Reservations. I think in later filming, they would just do a city at a time. But when they first started shooting, they would do 3-4 cities at a time, like in a run. They would shoot 6 episodes at once, just continuing. There's I think this was a Cook's Tour episode, but they show early on, they tried to do, I believe, Bangkok in a single 24-hour period. They were just going to try to shoot enough material to have an episode in 24 hours, which Anthony Bourdain was understandably pretty grumpy about. He was like very much like, all right, if you want to do that, then we're not retaking anything and you're not telling me anything. I'm just going to go and you're going to keep up. Which I don't know if he had the experience yet to be able to pull that off. I don't know how. I get the vibe that a Cook's Tour was maybe not great compared to what came after. Yeah, they were learning how to do it. They were figuring out what the show was. They were figuring out how they made the show. It was really like the three of them coming together to create what would be very much something new, and very much something that they could build off of. The reason we're releasing this episode when we are releasing this episode is because of Bourdain Day, which is celebrated on June 25th every year. That was his birthday. And so how we celebrate Bourdain Day is we eat food. we eat food at restaurants. We try different things that we haven't tried before. We drink a Negroni. We read Bourdain's books. Try new, strange, or unusual food. Have a bucket list meal. Cook something that he liked to cook. And don't kill yourself. That's how you celebrate Bourdain Day. Pay off Ozzy Argento. Thank you so much for listening. Our next show will be the reboot series of Doctor Who. IMDb treats the old series. I think it's a little bit of a question on whether it's one continuous series. IMDb treats older Doctor Who and new Doctor Who as two different series, which I think is correct given the difference in like production standards and how they're shot. So we will be doing new Doctor Who, which I'm excited about. I think Doctor Who will be an interesting one because I think it is a show with very, very high highs. I think the best of the new Doctor Who is some of the best television of the modern era, and I think also some extremely low lows. I think it was capable of being a truly bad show. So excited for both. Thank you so much for listening. Check out our Patreon only show, The Middleist, where we will be discussing the exact Middleist rated episode to see what the show looks like when everything is exactly average. That episode is season 2, episode 2, South Florida. We're going to Miami, baby. Yeah, and there's some interesting shit in there. There's some foreshadowing. There's some very strong foreshadowing and some interesting food. So we will see you there. And remember, no reservations. Yo.